Greetings. My name is Mike Levis, and I'm an instructor with the Mount Hood Ski Patrol Avalanche program. The topic of this presentation is self-rescue. The golden rule of self-rescue that you're going to hear several times throughout this presentation is don't get caught in an avalanche. It's much better to never have to use any of the techniques we're going to discuss in this module. This title slide has several images on it. The image on the left is a snowmobiler. You can see he's in the process of digging himself out. He was caught in an avalanche and partially buried, so he's quite lucky it was only a partial burial. He's quite lucky he didn't get separated from his snowmobile either. The image on the right is a gentleman who was completely buried and was able to dig himself out in pretty short order with the help of his companions. And you can see snow gets everywhere. So he had snow in his eyes and his nose, all over his head, even though he's got a hat on. Having said that, there's some techniques to help if you are unfortunate enough to get caught. In this module, we'll review briefly some precautions you can take when crossing a slope that you suspect can slide. We will then discuss the steps to take to escape an avalanche if caught, and things you can do to increase your odds of survival if you can't escape. So what if your route takes you across a slope that looks suspect? What should your plan be to minimize risk? Your best choice would be to look for an alternate route. Avoiding risk is the best form of risk minimization. If there are no viable alternatives, then make sure you pick a route that everyone in the group can ski. Having a team member get sketched out and stopped while traversing a suspect slope increases risk significantly. Make sure you have a safe staging area out of the slide path. Make sure you've identified escape routes, and make sure everyone understands the point of no return. So the point of no return is the point at which you're committed to that traverse, and there's no turning around to go back to your starting point. You hit the point of no return, and your only option is to keep going. Make sure everyone is geared up appropriately. Bundle up in the clothes you want to be buried in. Have your hood on, snug up those pack straps, and remove any straps to your gear, such as wrist straps to your poles. Make sure your skis have releasable bindings. Now is a good time to double check transceivers, make sure that they're on transmit and are stowed someplace where they won't get dislodged in the slide. Make sure, if you have one, that your Avalanche mouthpiece is in and airbags are ready with the trigger in your hand. Lastly, make sure everyone in the group knows the plan and has checked each other's gear. So now you're ready to go. This slide shows an example of how to cross a suspect slope. Cross high and fast, one at a time, using the same track if possible. Go from safe point to safe point. All other members of the party should have eyes on the person traversing. So if in spite of all these precautions a slide occurs and you get caught, what should you do? First, remember our golden rule. Don't get caught. However, if it appears you're going to get caught, there are some things you can do that may increase your chances of survival. Emphasis on may. Note all of these techniques are really focused on making you easier to find. They involve trying to get to the surface, creating a space to breathe, and minimizing trauma. So you want to shout out. Let the others in your party know. If you can ski out of the slide, to the side out of the slide, do it. If you feel yourself getting caught, get rid of gear, for example, poles, and try to swim to the side with your feet downhill. Keep your head uphill and protected. Make yourself as large as possible, which is the whole purpose of airbags. Try and push off the bed surface to force yourself to the top of the sliding layer. Close your mouth to keep snow out. As the slide slows, put your arm across your face, using your elbow to create an airspace across your mouth to breathe. As the slide slows, try and get closer to the top of the slide layer. Thrust an arm up to the surface if possible. When the slide stops, if possible, dig yourself out. Otherwise, stay still and try and conserve energy. Yell if you hear rescuers nearby. This slide shows a picture of many of the things we just discussed. Note that the techniques for self-rescue change as the victim progresses down the slide. This does not mean you should necessarily follow this sequence. If you're caught, do anything necessary to get out of the slide. As you can see at the top, the skier is trying to get out of the slide by escaping to the side. As the slide progresses and the skier is knocked down, the victim tries to swim upstream against the slide or tries to self-arrest to avoid being swept downhill. As the victim nears the bottom of the slide path, effort shifts to trying to get near the surface. So we discussed some tips to use to try and survive if you're caught in an avalanche. Remember the golden rule, however, don't get caught. However, we need to be realistic about these efforts. Recall our avalanche survival statistics as shown in the graph on the right. Something on the order of 25% of people caught in an avalanche are killed by trauma prior to burial. For those not killed by trauma outright, the survival drops to 50% after 15 to 20 minutes of burial. There is some evidence that struggling to stay on top helps. This reduces burial depth and should reduce burial time once you are found. Unfortunately, many of the other techniques may be good in theory, but very hard to do in practice. If you're caught in an avalanche, most likely you will be tossed around uncontrollably in the turbulent flow. You will inhale what surrounds you, snow. Any opening, mouth, ears, nose, etc., will get packed with snow. And as the flow slows, it sets up like concrete very quickly, so movement becomes very difficult. And all this happens very fast. So if you've ever been in an auto crash, you know that it seems to be unfolding in slow motion in front of you, but really it happens in the blink of an eye and there's very little time to do anything. Think about what you did in that situation. Were you able to react? What would you have done if you did not have airbags or seatbelts? It would have been a pretty unpleasant situation. The text in red at the bottom of the graph gives some data from real avalanche accidents. So you can see only 18% of the people caught could get rid of skis. 50% were unable to swim. 50% were completely buried. They were completely buried. Were able to create an air pocket and were able to keep breathing. So your best technique for self-rescue is don't get caught in an avalanche. That wraps up this module. Thank you for listening.